Hey everyone, today we dive into a story that redefines the limits of aerial combat. A story about a small squadron of Canadian pilots witnessing an impossible flash of silver tearing through the sky at over 500 miles per hour, an aircraft no one had ever seen before. Imagine 5 brave men, eyes wide with shock, as they see a streak of metal so fast it defies all known aircraft silhouettes. No propeller, no familiar shape. Just a blur of deadly precision slicing through the air near Nîmes in 1944. Could they really be witnessing the first enemy jet shot down with gunfire? Or was this just the beginning of a new era, one where speed, technology, and vulnerability collide? How did a revolutionary German fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262, with its jet engines and unprecedented velocity, both threaten and expose its own flaws? What secrets did German engineers hide in its fragile turbines, struggling with short engine life and sluggish throttle response, turning what should have been invincible into a dangerous gamble? And as Allied pilots learned to outmaneuver this technological marvel, waiting patiently during takeoffs and landings, did they find a way to turn the tide against Germany's most advanced weapon? What if the very aircraft that symbolized the future of aerial warfare was ultimately brought down not just by bravery, but by the limits of its own technology and the relentless ingenuity of those fighting to stop it? Could a single American pilot's daring attack, destroying 2 of these jets in a single mission, be the turning point that proved speed alone isn't enough? And what about the strategic battles over German airfields, where the Allies launched surprise strikes during vulnerable takeoff and landing phases, turning the jet's greatest strengths into its biggest weaknesses? How did the Germans defend their bases with flak corridors, decoys, and elite fighters, all trying to hold onto a crumbling dominance? This is a story of innovation and limitations, of technological marvels facing logistical nightmares, and of pilots risking everything in a desperate bid to keep the skies free. An epic clash where human skill and strategic cunning triumphed over raw speed and cutting-edge design. The question is, in this new era of jet warfare, was victory ever truly about the machines, or was it always about the mastery of tactics? And as the war drew to a close, did the legendary Me 262, with its broken turbines and scattered wreckage, mark the dawn of a new age? One that would forever change the future of aerial combat? Stay with us, because what you're about to hear might just rewrite everything you thought you knew about the skies in 1944. On the afternoon of October the 5th, in the year 1944, an extraordinary event unfolded high above the skies near Asselt in the Netherlands. A small band of 5 pilots from the Royal Canadian Air Force's No. 401st Squadron soared in formation, their Spitfire Mark 9s shimmering brilliantly under the clearing sun. From the deck of their formation, it was squadron leader Smith who first caught sight of it, an unmistakable flash of silver slicing through the air at what appeared to be an impossible speed, diving swiftly toward the town of Nîmes. At a quick glance, none of the familiar features of the aircraft could be discerned: no propeller rotating, no typical silhouette recognizable from previous encounters. Instead, what roared past was a streak of metal, darting through the sky with such velocity that the Canadians were momentarily stunned, their hearts pounding with the realization that they were witnessing something entirely unprecedented in aerial combat history. The aircraft in question was the German Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe, a jet-powered fighter that banked sharply, its exhaust leaving faint, shimmering trails against the background of a deep purple sky. For over 3 years, Allied intelligence units had been whispering in hushed tones about the potential development of jet aircraft by Germany, But all such rumors were mere shadows compared to the vivid and undeniable reality now hurtling past at speeds surpassing 500 miles per hour. Squadron leader Smith swiftly reached for his radio, alerting his fellow pilots, Flight Lieutenant Davenport, Flight Lieutenant Everard, Flying Officer Mai, and Flying Officer Sinclair, to take up attack positions and prepare for engagement. What ensued would be etched forever in the annals of aviation as the very first confirmed kill of an enemy jet fighter by gunfire in an air-to-air combat scenario. This event marked a pivotal turning point, not just tactically but symbolically, as it punctured the myth propagated by German propaganda that the Me-262 alone was an unstoppable wonder weapon, invincible in the skies. The defeat of this supposedly invulnerable aircraft laid bare its critical flaw, its vulnerability to well-timed and coordinated attacks. In the subsequent months, American pilots flying P-51 Mustangs would adapt and refine strategies that exploited this weakness, systematically hunting down the jets and limiting their effectiveness despite the revolutionary nature of their design. The impact of that initial encounter went beyond mere statistics. It sent shockwaves through Allied fighter units across the European theater. All who witnessed or understood the event grasped immediately that aerial combat had entered a new era. The German jets were no longer just a technological novelty. They had the potential to upend the long-held dominance of Allied air power if left unchecked. Captain Chuck Jagger, a seasoned pilot of the 357th Fighter Group stationed at Royal Air Force Lyon, listened carefully to the intelligence briefs with a growing sense of unease. Data revealed that the Me-262 could reach sustained speeds of about 540 miles per hour in level flight, far surpassing the roughly 437 miles per hour attainable by the P-51 Mustang. In a direct chase, it was essentially unpursuable, a brutal reality confirmed by simple mathematics and physics. This stark truth provided a sobering outlook. If Germany succeeded in deploying these jet fighters in large numbers, with sufficient fuel supplies and properly trained pilots, the strategic bombing campaigns, aimed at crippling German industry and infrastructure, could swiftly turn into tragic losses for the Allies. Heavy bombers like the B-17 Flying Fortress, lumbering through skies choked with anti-aircraft fire at a mere 180 miles per hour, would suddenly become vulnerable targets for these agile, high-speed interceptors capable of striking from virtually any angle and then escaping before escort fighters could come to their aid. For the first time since gaining dominance over Europe's skies, Allied commanders found themselves confronting a sobering possibility that their air superiority could be threatened, undermined, and possibly lost. However, the revolutionary design of the Me-262 was not without its own inherent vulnerabilities, which stemmed from the limitations and challenges associated with the state of jet propulsion technology in the year 1944. The power plant of the jet, a development of German engineering, was the Junkers Jumo 4004 turbojet engine, an engine that represented a quantum leap forward yet remained primitive in comparison to later generations. Each of these engines produced around 1,980 pounds of thrust, operating at nearly 8,700 revolutions per minute, but they consumed synthetic J2 fuel, derived from brown coal, at a rate roughly twice that of conventional piston-powered aircraft. The turbine blades constructed from chromother alloy, a material weighed down by the persistent shortages of heat-resistant nickel and chromium alloys, operated in conditions that caused chefs of thermal stress and frequent malfunction. Crafted to withstand high temperatures, these blades ran perilously close to their material limits, and their fragile operation was a significant factor contributing to the aircraft's vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities that could be exploited. The phenomenon known as thermal creep posed a significant challenge for the WWII engines, especially under combat conditions. These engines, which powered the German Messerschmitt Me-262 fighters, typically demanded overhaul after approximately 10 hours of intense operation, with the complete replacement of the engine often becoming necessary after roughly 100 hours of flying. To put that into perspective, this meant that after merely 3 or 4 combat missions, often involving rapid and aggressive maneuvers, the Me-262s required new engines. Such rapid engine wear created logistical nightmares for the German ground crews, who struggled to keep an adequate supply of replacement engines available. It's important to understand that this high rate of engine failure was a persistent problem that the German military could never fully resolve, thereby complicating operational planning and aircraft readiness. Another critical issue stemmed from the engine's throttle response. Unlike traditional piston engines, which tend to react almost instantaneously to pilot input, the WWII exhibited a significant delay between throttle adjustment and engine response. This lag had serious tactical implications. When a pilot advanced the throttle too rapidly in combat, the engine's combustion chambers would receive an influx of excessive fuel before the airflow could adequately increase, leading to a dangerous rise in temperature within the jet pipe. This became a critical safety concern because the rapidly elevating temperatures risked damaging turbine blades and causing engine failure. Consequently, pilots were forced to make painstakingly gentle and precise throttle adjustments, carefully easing the power up and down to allow the engine to stabilize before making further changes. This approach, while necessary for engine safety, severely limited the fighter's responsiveness during combat, an environment where split-second decisions and rapid reactions often meant the difference between victory and defeat. During combat, this sluggish throttle response had tangible tactical consequences. The Me-262, famed for its remarkable speed and maneuverability at high altitude, was transformed during decisive moments into an unexpectedly vulnerable target. Its inability to respond swiftly to pilot commands meant that, during critical maneuvers such as evasive action or rapid climb, the aircraft often could not react quickly enough to evade enemy fighters. Ironically, the same technological advances that made the Me-262 the world's fastest fighter at high altitude, namely its jet engines, became its greatest liability during low-speed phases of flight. Particularly during takeoff and landing, the weaknesses of the jet engines were magnified into potential disasters. The aircraft's design, featuring a wing loading of approximately 294 kilograms per square meter, a payload significantly higher than that of contemporary piston fighters, necessitated high airspeed thresholds for safe takeoff and landing. Specifically, a runway speed exceeding 110 miles per hour was required for a safe departure, and similar speeds applied during approaches for landing. These fast speeds had to be achieved during departure, and slowed down during descent, all while managing the inherent limitations of the engines. The critical acceleration phase after releasing the brakes illustrated this problem vividly. During takeoff, the Me-262 took nearly 30 seconds to reach flying speed, during which its engines had to produce enough thrust to propel the aircraft down the runway. Yet, at such low airspeeds, the jet engines struggled to generate sufficient thrust. Instead, they responded sluggishly, forcing the aircraft to move in a straight, predictable line at a steady speed with limited control. During these deadly moments, any Allied fighter aircraft waiting nearby could simply wait for the Me-262 to become vulnerable. Since the jet was virtually helpless in this initial moment of acceleration, the enemy fighters posed a formidable threat, capable of closing the gap and launching attacks with little opportunity for countermeasures. Landing, too, was fraught with danger. As the Me-262 pilots descended toward their airfields following missions that often lasted 60 to 90 minutes, their fuel gauges were nearing empty. During this phase, pilots needed to slow down from high-speed flight, deploy their flaps and landing gear, and effectively transition from high-speed cruise to a safe landing speed. Unfortunately, these maneuvers left the aircraft at significant risk because the engine's inadequate low-speed response meant the fighter was vulnerable to being caught in predictable flight patterns, flying straight and level at these crucial moments. The revolutionary jet engines that provided the Me-262 with extraordinary speed and altitude performance, assets that made it an almost invincible fighter at high altitude, paradoxically turned into liabilities during these lower speed, low-gear phases of flight. Scientists and military analysts at the 8th Air Force Headquarters in England studied this complex problem with meticulous research during the late summer and early fall of 1944. Using various reconnaissance methods, including aerial photography of jet bases such as Amma, Hepe, Rena, Lechfeld, and Munich Re, analysis was conducted to understand the aircraft's operational environment better. Gun camera footage from the few encounters between Allied fighters and the Me-262 revealed both its undeniable advantages at high speed and altitude as well as its pronounced weaknesses at low speed. Military intelligence knew that once the high-speed, fuel-consuming pursuits were over, the Me-262 pilots faced a limited window to return the vastness of the German landscapes, combined with the strategic placement of jet bases across the continent, created a unique and critical vulnerability that Allied fighters learned to exploit. Recognizing this, a new strategic opportunity arose. If propeller-driven fighters could remain in the vicinity of these jet strongholds without risking early detection, they could strike unexpectedly during the moment when jets, especially the latest models like the Me-262, were most exposed, during their takeoff and landing phases. Executing such an approach demanded exceptional patience and stamina from the pilots, as well as extensive endurance on their aircraft's fuel tanks. Flying perilously close to some of the most heavily defended and fortified territories in Germany was not only risky but required a high degree of skill and daring. This tactic, however, stood out as one of the few reliable methods by which slower propeller fighters could have a fighting chance to face these fast-moving jet aircraft on somewhat more equal terms. The German Luftwaffe swiftly recognized this Achilles heel following the first reports of their jets being shot down under such circumstances. In response, they implemented comprehensive defensive measures aimed at thwarting these daring ambush tactics. They constructed elaborately fortified flak corridors along the expected approach routes leading to jet bases, where clusters of large-caliber anti-aircraft guns, including 88mm guns, 37mm automatic cannons, and quad 20mm guns, formed dense curtains of protective fire. Any attacking aircraft attempting to penetrate these defenses would have to confront this deadly wall of steel, making a clean strike increasingly difficult. To bolster their defenses further, command authorities assigned their most advanced piston engine fighters, the formidable Focke-Wulf FW-190D, known colloquially as the Faltering Wolf, and the rare TAR 152H, to serve as escort fighters providing top cover during critical phases such as the jet's takeoffs and landings. These escorts became an essential part of the defensive strategy, aiming to intercept any enemy aircraft trying to disrupt the jet operations during their most vulnerable moments. In addition to physical barriers, the Germans employed tactical deception to complicate Allied efforts. They varied the timings of jet departures and arrivals, often randomizing schedules so that friendly aircraft could not easily anticipate or predict when a launch would happen. To lure enemy fighters into well-placed traps, some bases used decoys, faux aircraft carefully positioned to deceive and draw attacking planes into areas heavily defended by anti-aircraft fire. Furthermore, the Germans adapted their logistics and infrastructure, transforming locations like the Autobahn near several jet bases into disguised emergency landing fields covered with camouflage and concealed within the surrounding woods. These makeshift airstrips provided the Me-262s a sanctuary from detection or interception, allowing them to operate from hidden locations that Allied intelligence might not have accurately identified, thereby complicating Allied efforts to disrupt their operations. Despite all these layers of defense, the core tactical challenge persisted. Jet aircraft like the Me-262 could not eliminate their need for takeoff and landing, phases during which they were at their most vulnerable. During these moments, they became nearly helpless, exposed not only due to their limited defenses but also because the act of launching or touching down exposed their pilots and aircraft to concentrated attack. In early October of '44, a young American pilot named Lieutenant Urban Drew from Detroit, aged exactly 21, became very familiar with this vulnerability through his direct encounters with the jet menace during missions flown over German-held territories. His previous sortie had already exposed him to the formidable capabilities of the Me-262. Leading him to compile detailed intelligence reports outlining the specifics of these aircraft's armament, speed, and operational tactics. Interestingly, on October 7 of that same year, Drew was temporarily grounded and faced disciplinary action for performing an unauthorized victory roll after a successful mission, an act he believed celebrated a well-earned success. However, the punishment for this minor breach was quickly eclipsed by more urgent developments. Intelligence reports indicated a significant concentration of Me-262s at what was known as Akma Arid Drome, in northwestern Germany. Recognizing the strategic importance of attacking this dissemination point, pilots like Drew, who had prior knowledge of the jet's capabilities from his earlier encounters, became the perfect candidate for leading a daring fighter sweep against the base. Careful in his planning, Drew assembled his crew for the mission. He emphasized to his wingman, Second Lieutenant Robert McCandless, and the rest of the formation that to succeed, they would need to maintain the element of surprise, approaching quickly and aggressively, and accepting the substantial risks posed by German anti-aircraft defenses. Drew's aircraft was a P-51 Mustang, identified by its coded markings as E-2D and nicknamed Detroit Miss, painted with pride. Loaded with enough fuel and wing tanks to sustain nearly 4 hours of continuous flight, he felt confident that he could sustain a prolonged attack if necessary. That October afternoon, the sky over Germany was characterized by broken cloud cover, with good visibility that was crucial for spotting enemy aircraft with the engines humming powerfully and the pilots meticulously preparing for their respective takeoffs. The air was thick with anticipation and the imminent chaos of combat. Drew pushed the throttle in a decisive, firm gesture, causing his fighter to surge forward with increasing velocity. In a swift, almost instinctive movement, he dropped into a high-speed dive, rapidly gaining momentum while simultaneously losing altitude as he accelerated downward. As the sound of the Mustang's powerful engine echoed through the air, it cut through the atmosphere with relentless intensity, reaching speeds beyond 400 miles per hour. Amidst this frenetic descent, nearby, the German Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighters lined up on the runway, their takeoff runs just beginning, their jet engines already roaring in preparation. At this critical moment, Drew's Mustang sliced past at an astonishing velocity. His aircraft's roar was deafening, surpassing 400 miles per hour as he streaked past the German jets. Simultaneously, in the lead of the German formation, flying the advanced Me-262 designed for high-speed interception, was Oberfeldwebel Heinz Arnold's aircraft. It had only reached a modest speed of about 80 miles per hour when, suddenly, Drew's gunfire erupted from approximately 800 yards away. His twin 650 caliber machine guns unleashed a rapid and deadly barrage, their tracers illuminating the darkened sky as they homed in on the swift-moving target. The tracer rounds traced fiery paths through the air, ultimately striking the right engine of Arnold's jet. The impact was devastating. The engine disintegrated violently, sending shrapnel and flame bursting outward. Arnold's aircraft lurched fiercely as the destruction took hold, but by that point, it was already too late to abort the takeoff. The jet, now crippled and spewing smoke and flames, continued its futile attempt to lift off, fighting to maintain a semblance of control against the loss of power. Drew closed the gap to approximately 400 yards, tightening his aim, and opened fire once more. This time, his shots struck the cockpit area, shattering panels and causing further chaos within the aircraft. Arnold's Me-262, unable to sustain flight, stalled and rolled inverted before plunging downward into a stand of trees just beside the runway. The plane exploded upon impact, igniting into a blazing inferno that could be seen for miles. Witnesses could only watch helplessly as such a sleek, fearsome piece of German engineering was reduced to a fiery wreckage. Nearby, a second Me-262, piloted by Lieutenant Gerd Kaubert, had observed Arnold's downfall. Witnessing the destruction ignited a sense of urgency in Kaubert. As Drew's aircraft continued its attack run, Kaubert desperately attempted to abort his own takeoff, hoping to avoid the same fate. However, his fighter's sluggish throttle response and the high speed he had already attained meant that deceleration and safe evacuation from the runway were nearly impossible in the limited time available. Despite his efforts, Kaubert's aircraft was still rolling at a perilous velocity as Drew, having completed his initial attack run, immediately repositioned for a second strike. Meanwhile, a warning crackled through McCandless's radio. Anti-aircraft fire, or flak, was erupting nearby, and German gunners were finding their target. Shells of 88 mm exploded ominously around Drew and his squadron, dark puffs of smoke and shrapnel bursts punctuating the tense airspace as the fighters navigated through the barrage. Drew paid little heed to the incoming projectiles, instead focusing on his position and intent to strike again. He dove once more into the fray, releasing a prolonged, deadly burst of gunfire that targeted Kaubert's Me-262 as the jet was attempting to exit the runway's far end. The rapid gunfire painted a fiery scene across the fuselage and both engines, with bullet strikes igniting visible sparks and damaging critical components. The damaged aircraft responded by losing speed dramatically, slowing to a crawl, and then suddenly erupting into a fierce inferno. The fuel tanks, compromised and leaking, ignited in a spectacular explosion that lit up the sky like lightning. Kaubert managed to escape from the blazing wreckage, fleeing mere moments before the flaming aircraft was consumed entirely, but it was evident that his fighter was a total write-off, a complete loss from battle. In less than 2 minutes, Drew had achieved what would become one of the most remarkable feats of the air war. He had destroyed 2 of Germany's most sophisticated and advanced fighter aircraft, employing tactics that would influence and become standard practice for Allied pilots in the ensuing battles. This engagement served as a powerful demonstration that possessing cutting-edge technology like the Me-262 was insufficient on its own. During critical moments of flight, such advantages could be nullified through skilled attack and precise timing. Drew's aggressive approach and well-timed strikes illustrated vividly that commitment, audacity, and tactical ingenuity could effectively counter even the most technologically superior enemies. However, on a memorable day in history, the United States Air Force officially recognized a remarkable hero, Drew, by bestowing upon him the prestigious Air Force Cross on the 12th of May, 1983. The award ceremony, a momentous occasion, was officiated by none other than Secretary of the Air Force Vern Orr, who personally presented this distinguished honor. To celebrate this extraordinary achievement, Drew and his wife were flown from Johannesburg, South Africa, across the vast Atlantic and down to the United States aboard a C-141 Starlifter transport aircraft, which facilitated their journey from afar to the ceremony in a display of military pomp and ceremony. Drew's valor and exceptional skill earned him a place in history as the first, and thus far, the only, Allied pilot to shoot down two jet aircraft within a single combat mission while flying a propeller-driven fighter. This feat remains unparalleled in the annals of aerial combat history, symbolizing a rare combination of bravery, tactical ingenuity, and perseverance in the face of modern aerial warfare's rapid evolution. Meanwhile, on the 17th of October in the year 1944, another significant but somewhat uncertain victory was recorded. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemper, serving with the renowned 479th Fighter Group, engaged in a tense aerial confrontation over Germany. During this sortie, Zemper believed he had successfully shot down a Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter, an aircraft then feared and renowned for its remarkable speed and technology. However, the exact details of this shootdown remain shrouded in ambiguity. Zemper, who was among the most experienced fighter leaders within the 8th Air Force, had initially engaged a target believed to be a Bf-109. But when reviewing his gun camera footage after the mission, the images proved ambiguous. The footage showed an aircraft that could have been either a Messerschmitt 109 propeller fighter or an Me-262 jet fighter, leaving some doubt as to the true nature of the victory. In the aftermath of the war, military analysts revisited these claims, revealing that the aircraft in question was very likely an Me-262, yet the victory was never conclusively confirmed due to the limited clarity of the footage. Despite this uncertainty concerning individual claims, a larger pattern was emerging. It became increasingly evident that American fighter pilots were learning vital lessons about confronting the revolutionary jet fighters. Despite their technological superiority and exceptional speed, Me-262s were not invincible. They could be countered effectively by tactical ingenuity and adaptive combat strategies. Rather than engaging the jets head-on in their preferred environment, high-altitude, supersonic, high-speed dogfights, American pilots realized that victory depended on forcing these jets into vulnerable situations where the jet's speed advantage was diminished or nullified. One notable example illustrating this tactical advantage occurred on November 6, 1944. On that day, Lieutenant Chuck Jagger, commanding a P-51 Mustang named Rocketing Glen III, affectionately named after his wife Glennice, led a bomber escort mission near the small German settlement of Acma. As Jagger's aircraft cruised at patrol altitude, he suddenly spotted a group of Me-262 jets attempting to intercept the bomber formation, executing their offensive tactics with lethal efficiency. The jets streaked through the formation at incredible velocities, executing brief, high-speed passes, firing a few rounds, then using their superior thrust and acceleration to zoom away and climb back to altitude, out of reach of the pursuing escorts. Despite standard doctrine advising against chasing the elusive Me-262s, since engaging these jets in their preferred high-altitude environment was usually futile, Jagger made a daring and calculated decision. He recognized that those jets, with limited fuel endurance, could not stay airborne indefinitely, especially as they prepared to land soon to refuel and rearm. Driven by this realization, he broke away from the main bomber formation and descended through the overcast skies, descending carefully to a lower altitude near Acma Airfield. Below him, Jagger observed a lone Me-262 in the landing pattern, its landing gear and flaps extended, flying at a reduced speed, likely no more than around 150 miles per hour, lining up meticulously for the final approach. The German pilot, fully concentrated on executing his landing, seemed to remain unaware of the descending Mustang that was rapidly closing in from above and behind. Seizing the moment, Jagger pushed his throttle to maximum, trimming his aircraft for the fastest possible dive. The P-51 instantly responded, accelerating rapidly as gravity supercharged its descent. Using gravity and skillful handling, Jaeger increased his speed well above 450 miles per hour, closing rapidly on the unsuspecting jet. At a distance of approximately 300 yards, he opened fire, walking his tracers onto the Me-262's wings and fuselage, with the intense bursts illuminating the aircraft in a flickering glow as bullets tore through its structure. The initial barrage struck the left wing, causing sparks to fly as the bullets damaged the wing's surface, and in the tense and perilous chaos of aerial combat, one such harrowing incident unfolded when a fighter aircraft unexpectedly lost its bearings, spun into an inverted position, and plummeted into the dense woods just a few hundred feet short of the main runway threshold. The impact ignited immediately upon collision, erupting into a fierce and blazing ball of fiery orange flame that illuminated the surrounding forested terrain. Yet, amid this devastating scene of destruction, there was no moment for the victorious pilot to savor or celebrate his success. The intensity of the battle had barely begun, and danger lurked both in the air and on the ground below. Almost instinctively, Acma, the defending anti-aircraft gunners, responded with unwavering precision. Without hesitation, their large, powerful anti-aircraft guns, armed with 88mm shells, opened fire with tremendous force. Shells burst in all directions around the airfield, with the deafening explosions echoing through the air and creating a chaotic barrage that filled the sky. From the cockpit of his sleek Mustang fighter aircraft, Jagger raced across the airfield at immense speed, flying at treetop height, an extremely risky maneuver, while explosions and tracer rounds flashed all around him. His only hope for survival was to maintain unrelenting speed and keep his flight path straight down the runway, desperately trying to outrun the incoming barrage before the enemy anti-aircraft crews could adjust their aim to bring him down. Tracer bullets arced beautifully through the sky from both sides of the runway, illuminating his path and marking the deadly canopy of hostility that surrounded him. In the chaos of the attack, some of the enemy rounds fired from one side of the airfield ultimately struck enemy positions located on the opposite side thanks to the unpredictable and tumultuous nature of the gunfire exchange. Despite the terrifying barrage, Jagger kept his wits about him, holding his P-51 Mustang low and executing high speeds. He managed to clear the far end of the airfield, an achievement of both skill and nerve, before pulling up sharply in a hard, steep dive aimed toward a nearby valley that offered safety and concealment. Surviving an extraordinarily dangerous tactical scenario, a daylight low-altitude raid on an enemy airfield, demonstrated not only Jagger's exceptional flying ability but also served as a testament to the vulnerability of the Me-262 jet fighters, which could be tracked, hunted, and ultimately destroyed if proper tactics were employed. Jagger later recounted the engagement with characteristic modesty, noting that his first encounter with a jet aircraft had resulted in shooting it down. His words, as usual, were understated. "First time I saw a jet, I shot it down." Not very sportsmanlike, but what the hell? This candid reflection encapsulated the brutal, pragmatic reality faced by pilots during this fierce airborne conflict. An ongoing challenge to adapt tactics quickly and efficiently against a technologically superior enemy. Throughout late 1944 and extending into 1945, American fighter pilots dedicated considerable effort to perfecting their anti-jet combat tactics. These strategies weren't developed overnight. They were based on rigorous experience gained through direct engagement and on meticulous analysis of gun camera footage, which allowed pilots to review their actions frame by frame, refining their approaches and timing. The renowned P-51 Mustang proved to be the ideal aircraft for these missions, thanks to its remarkable range and endurance. When fully fueled internally and outfitted with an array of auxiliary drop tanks on its wings, a Mustang could stay aloft for more than 7 hours. This extraordinary endurance provided pilots with a strategic advantage. It enabled them to loiter deliberately near known jet bases, patiently waiting for the right moment to strike. The pilots effectively turned their aircraft into patrol platforms, capable of sustaining long stretches of vigilance until conditions were optimal for attack. When the time came to confront the jets, Mustang pilots capitalized on their aircraft's superior climbing ability and altitude advantage. Their preferred tactic was to initiate dives on the enemy jets, descending from high altitude at tremendous speed, during which a P-51 could briefly approach or even surpass 500 miles per hour. This burst of speed was crucial because it allowed them to intercept the Me-262 aircraft during their most vulnerable, exposed phases, such as during launch from runways or in their early or late approach phases. Precise timing was essential here. Attacking a jet during its takeoff meant spotting it early, positioning for attack before it reached the necessary flying speed, and engaging at just the right moment when the enemy was most vulnerable. Similarly, engaging a jet during its landing approach required patience and strategic patience, waiting for the perfect opportunity when the enemy aircraft was committed to its final descent, gear and flaps deployed, fully in their approach path. Such moments presented the best chance for a successful attack because the jet pilot was less likely to be able to evade or execute a go-around under these conditions. Through persistent effort, American pilots gained an intricate knowledge of the Me-262's operational patterns, gleaned from continuous observation, intelligence reports, and post-mission analysis. It was simply impossible for the aircraft to suddenly gain speed and break free from pursuit or escape the reach of their enemies. Over time, the Luftwaffe's defensive strategies grew more and more intricate and sophisticated in a relentless attempt to counteract these relentless tactics, yet certain fundamental issues remained unresolved, deeply rooted in the limitations of the technology and logistics involved. Defensive networks within the Luftwaffe's airfields, often called flak alleys, became increasingly dense, sometimes featuring multiple corridors protected by more than 100 anti-aircraft guns of various calibers, creating a lethal maze intended to halt or disable attacking fighters and bombers. In response to these hurdles, Allied fighter escort missions ramped up significantly, with specialized aircraft such as the Focke-Wulf FW-190D and the Ta-152H aircraft being deployed and specifically ordered to engage and counterattack Allied fighters whenever they loomed near jet bases, regardless of the tactical context or immediate threat level. The pilots operating the Me-262 jets received explicit instructions to adopt more unpredictable approach patterns during their sorties. They were trained to perform random turns, altitude adjustments, and course changes to complicate and thwart interception efforts by enemy fighters. Some of the most proactive bases even deployed smoke generators, essential devices that created obscuring clouds of smoke, to conceal the airfields during crucial landing and takeoff operations, hoping to make these vital phases of aircraft movement more difficult for enemy fighters to target. Nevertheless, despite these creative countermeasures and tactical modifications, the harsh mathematical and logistical realities underpinning aerial combat could not be altered. The technologically advanced Me-262 jets depended heavily on having access to specific bases equipped with the appropriate fuel supplies. They could only stay airborne for limited duration before needing to land for refueling and maintenance. Allied fighters, with their numerical superiority and relentless aggressiveness, could saturate the areas surrounding these jet bases, ensuring that some form of engagement or interception was almost unavoidable. This inevitability was vividly demonstrated on February 25, in the year of 1945, which proved to be one of the most devastating showcasing of these tactics and the vulnerabilities inherent in the German jet program at that time. On that memorable day, Mustang fighters from the 55th Fighter Group executed a surprise attack on the German jet airfield at Geilstadt, catching an entire staff of Me-262s during their takeoff roll, as they managed to skillfully neuralize the element of surprise. The attack was perfectly timed, just as multiple jets began their critical departure phases, allowing the American pilots to capitalize on chaos and confusion. In the frantic aftermath, Allied fighters succeeded in destroying 6 Me-262s either on the ground or during their initial attempts to take off, with several additional jets sustaining damage that rendered them temporarily or permanently inoperable. These losses accounted for a substantial proportion of the operational jet force that the German side could field in that region, significantly reducing their tactical capabilities. Historical records from the Germans indicate that many of these lost jets belonged to the Kriegsflieger Kommando Flieger Kampfgeschwader 54, better known as KFKA 54, a bomber unit that had been modernized and re-equipped with early jet aircraft. Nevertheless, the pilots within this unit suffered from a serious deficiency: they lacked adequate fighter training and combat experience necessary to maximize the jet's potential or defend effectively against determined Allied intercepts. The attack carried out by the 55th Fighter Group with their Mustangs starkly demonstrated that concentrated fighter sweeps targeting jet bases at times when aircraft were known to be operational could strike significant blows, albeit at considerable risk to the attacking fighters themselves. During the engagement, several Mustang aircraft incurred damage from the fierce defensive fire concentrated around the airfield, underscoring the extreme danger involved. However, the tactical success of such attacks depended crucially on the element of complete surprise, catching the defending jets and their personnel off guard. These decisive strikes took on a profoundly psychological dimension. The repeated losses inflicted during such collaborative sorties planted seeds of dread and apprehension among German jet pilots. Many of these pilots were considered elite. They had been meticulously selected and extensively trained to operate the cutting-edge Me-262 aircraft, often veterans of previous campaigns with significant combat experience and technological confidence. Initially, these pilots approached their missions with a justified sense of confidence. Their aircraft's superior speed and advanced design gave them a tangible technological advantage, fostering a belief that they could dominate the skies and minimize vulnerabilities. Yet, the repeated losses during critical moments, particularly during takeoff and landing phases, began to chip away at this confidence. These phases of flight became synonymous with danger. Every departure became fraught with the fear of being ambushed, and every landing was approached with growing caution. Furthermore, pilots became increasingly aware of the psychological pressure stemming from the ever-present threat that Allied fighters could be waiting for them at the runway, ready to strike during vulnerable moments when the aircraft was physically and mentally compromised. The knowledge that there was often no feasible escape route once they committed to the landing process, since once the battle was often remembered as the final significant aerial clash over the skies of Germany during the Second World War. On this occasion, Luftwaffe commanders assembled a formidable formation of 37 Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighters, which they had gathered from the facilities at Yakushvada 7. These aircraft, representing the most advanced combat jets the Germans had developed by that time, were tasked with a highly coordinated and last-ditch assault against an extensive formation of Allied bombers. This operation marked the largest and most concentrated jet-powered attack ever committed to a single mission in the conflict's history, displaying both desperation and determination on the part of the German forces. Leading this formidable attack was Oberleutnant Gau Wegmann, an experienced and renowned pilot. He commanded his squadron in a loosely organized formation, heading directly towards the inbound enemy bomber formations. For the first time during actual combat operations, Wegmann and his wingmen deployed R-4M unguided rockets, an innovative weapon system designed specifically for such attacks. These rockets, carrying a hefty 50mm warhead, were mounted on underwing racks, with each aircraft carrying a dozen of these projectiles. The purpose of the R-4M was rather straightforward. It aimed to detonate in close proximity to the bomber formations or individual aircraft, creating destructive blast effects and shattering fragments without the need for precise aiming. This method was considered an effective tactic against large, developing formations of bombers, which could be difficult to hit with conventional guns. As the Germans surged forward, Wegmann's rockets tore into a formation of 60 B-7 bombers, which were part of the vast Allied formations. Eyewitnesses and aerial observers reported seeing multiple bombers hit and subsequently falling away from the attacking formation, indicating some level of success. Meanwhile, other Me-262 pilots continued their assault, employing their more familiar and reliable 30mm cannons. Due to the high-speed nature of these jet fighters, the pilots were able to make multiple passes over the formation, striking multiple targets before the escort fighters could effectively respond or intercept. This engagement, despite its brevity, was remarkably intense and fierce. The claims of victory made by German pilots were quite substantial. They asserted having shot down 12 bombers and 1 enemy fighter. However, the actual records from United States sources tell a different story. After a thorough review, American records show that the Germans likely destroyed only about 8 heavy bombers during the entire attack. In addition, 3 Me-262 jets were lost in combat in this engagement. The discrepancy between the German claims and the verified losses highlighted a common wartime occurrence, overclaiming, a phenomenon often caused by the chaos, confusion, and fog of battle, leading pilots and commanders to overestimate their kill tally. Even when considering the more optimistic claims, the realities of the engagement were stark. The jets claimed to have shot down roughly 12 bombers, which amounted to less than 1% of the entire attacking force. Meanwhile, the overwhelming bomber formation pressed on towards its target, successfully delivering its payload of destruction. The enduring strategic bombing campaign, the cornerstone of the Allied air effort, remained largely unaffected. The losses on this mission were significant. 5 American fighter pilots failed to return to base, and dozens of bomber crew members either lost their lives or were taken prisoners of war. Despite these grim statistics, the mission was declared a success from the perspective of the Allied strategic planning. The targeted attack did not effectively disable the bomber formation, but it did demonstrate the capability of the Germans' new jet fighters and their potential as part of a retaliatory or disruptive force. Significantly, the German military's last effort to field a concentrated jet fighter force came in February of the year 1945 when Adolf Galland, who was once Germany's most prominent fighter general, re-established a specialized unit called Jagdverband 44. This elite squadron was formed with the most experienced and accomplished Luftwaffe aces, many of whom had amassed vast numbers of confirmed victories. The unit was given priority access to the finest aircraft, fuel supplies, and logistical support available, an indication of how precious and rare such resources had become for Germany in its final months. Galland himself took to the skies, leading combat missions and scoring additional victories with both his cannons and the R-4M rockets, thus maintaining his reputation as one of the Luftwaffe's most accomplished pilots. Other pilots within the unit communicated successes against large bomber formations, and some even claimed to have scored against escorting fighters when the tactical conditions favored the tactics of the jet fighters. Despite these individual successes, the operational life of Jagdverband 44 was sadly short-lived, measured not in months but in mere weeks. A relentless Allied bombing campaign targeted the bases and airfields used by the Germans, forcing the unit to relocate repeatedly, often under hurried and hazardous conditions. Moreover, persistent fuel shortages grounded many aircraft for days at a time, severely limiting their operational availability. Engine reliability problems, common among the early jet fighters, hindered during its operational lifespan. The Messerschmitt Me 262, despite being the world's first true jet fighter, faced numerous challenges that hindered its full potential. Its deployment was fraught with logistical difficulties, meaning that the aircraft could often be out of service either due to maintenance issues or the aftermath of combat engagements. At no point during the war did the German Luftwaffe have more than 50 Me 262s gamefully ready for combat at any given time. Typically, the daily operational readiness hovered closer to a mere 25 aircraft. This relatively small force was constantly under threat from the overwhelming strength of Allied air power, which at any moment could field more than 5,000 fighter aircraft and thousands more bombers challenging the skies. The sheer numerical disparity made the prospects of the Me 262's effectiveness appear daunting and, in the end, almost insurmountable from a strategic standpoint. The pilots of the Me 262, however, reported an impressive tally, claiming approximately 542 Allied aircraft shot down in air-to-air combat missions. These figures, although celebrated by German pilots, must be taken with caution, as wartime claims were often exaggerated across all sides, driven by the fog of combat and the desire to boost morale. Post-war analysis conducted by American researchers, who meticulously examined captured aircraft and verified losses, suggested that the actual number of aircraft shot down by Me 262s was considerably lower than the wartime claims. Their detailed assessments indicated that Allied forces had destroyed Me 262s at a rate exceeding Germany's ability to produce or train new pilots fast enough to sustain their operational numbers. American records specifically credit the North American P-51 Mustang fighters with a confirmed tally of 92.5 kills of Me 262s. This figure includes not only the aircraft shot down in the air but also those destroyed on the ground or during procedures such as takeoff and landing. incidents that could not be categorized as traditional dogfights. The 357th Fighter Group, famously led by Chuck Jagger, was the top unit in terms of jet victories, boasting 18.5 confirmed Me-262 kills. The 55th Fighter Group followed with 17 confirmed kills, while both the 78th Fighter Group and the 339th Fighter Group each contributed 15 victories to the tally, indicating their significant role in the air war against the German jet. On the British side, RAF pilots flying aircraft such as the Hawker Tempest and the Spitfire claimed approximately 12 additional kills against the Me-262. These engagements reflected the collaborative efforts of Allied forces against this state-of-the-art but limited German aircraft. Over time, even though operational losses to the Me-262 were mounting, the number of replacements and new aircraft produced by Germany could not keep pace. As a result, the number of operational jets steadily declined, despite ongoing production efforts until the very end of the war. The post-war interviews with German aces who flew the Me-262 reveal a spectrum of opinions regarding its combat effectiveness. Some pilots, such as Georg Peter Ida, who claimed 12 kills, including 9 P-51 Mustangs, admitted that the jet's impressive high-speed capabilities granted them a certain safety in high-altitude bomber interceptor missions, but also noted that Allied countermeasures continually minimized this advantage. Walter Dahl, credited with 11 total jet victories, including 6 against Mustangs, emphasized that practical limitations had a substantial impact on the aircraft's battlefield value. He highlighted that fuel restrictions and frequent engine reliability issues limited its tactical flexibility, ultimately rendering the jet's theoretical superiority largely irrelevant in real operational conditions. Another notable figure, Heinrich Bahr, credited with an impressive total of 16 Me-262 kills out of an overall career tally of 240 victories, was straightforward in his assessment. He stated confidently that the jet aircraft had arrived too late in the war and in insufficient numbers to make any meaningful difference in the overall conflict. Franz Schall, who achieved the highest kill count for the type with 17 confirmed victories, comprising 6 4-engine bombers and 10 P-51 Mustangs, was tragically killed in action in April of 1945. Earlier reports from Franz Schall underlined a critical tactical flaw of the Me-262. The aircraft's high approach speeds and broad turning radius made it less effective at engaging maneuverable enemy fighters, who exploited these weaknesses with agility and close-quarters tactics. Despite these shortcomings, the lessons learned during the deployment of the Me-262 left a lasting impact on the development of jet fighters worldwide. As the war drew to a close, Allied engineers and scientists undertook extensive studies of captured aircraft, conducting thorough testing at advanced facilities in both the United States and Britain. These evaluations confirmed fundamental design strengths of the Me-262 but also identified engine technology as the core limiting factor. The improvements in jet fighter engines during this period were driven by the challenges experienced with the Me-262's powerplants. Early American jets, such as the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star and the Republic F-84 Thunderjet, as well as newly designed Soviet aircraft like the MiG-15, all incorporated technological solutions based on the pursuit of improved fuel efficiency and the reinforcement of aircraft structures specifically designed to counteract the vulnerabilities exploited by Allied fighters. Marked a significant evolution in the development of the jet fighters used in the last years of World War II. These advancements were not merely incremental. They represented a concerted effort to enhance the operational resilience and combat survivability of these high-performance machines, ensuring they could meet the demands of increasingly intense aerial battles. Among the American pilots who bravely faced these formidable jet aircraft, those who managed to shoot down the German Me-262s earned a distinguished reputation within the fighter community. Their success stories became subjects of keen study and analysis, with combat reports meticulously examined by intelligence officers, tactical trainers, and strategic analysts. Such insights played a vital role in shaping subsequent tactics and training programs. Beyond the well-known figures like Urban Drew and Chuck Jagger, countless other daring pilots accumulated jet victories through relentless perseverance and a willingness to learn from experience, applying newly developed tactics learned in the crucible of aerial combat. These exceptional aviators were often characterized by a distinctive set of traits that contributed to their success amidst perilous circumstances. They tended to possess outstanding visual acuity, which proved vital in spotting elusive targets at high velocities and great distances. Their marksmanship was highly precise, allowing them to capitalize on brief windows of opportunity during dogfights at extreme speeds. They exhibited aggressive temperaments, an essential quality given the inherently risky nature of their missions, marked by boldness, decisiveness, and an unflinching willingness to confront danger head-on. Crucially, these pilots were also prepared to accept risks that more cautious comrades hesitated to undertake, such as attacking heavily defended jet bases deeply entrenched in flak and enemy defenses, an act that often neared the limits of recklessness but was driven by strategic necessity. Their repeated willingness to undertake such perilous missions underscored their deep understanding of the broader strategic picture. They knew that neutralizing the threat posed by the Japanese jet fleet was pivotal for maintaining aerial superiority and safeguarding Allied gains on the ground and at sea. Yet, these relentless assaults exacted a heavy toll on both sides, inflicting significant human costs that reverberated through the entire conflict. American fighter pilots, often far from their homeland, faced the lethal dangers of dense anti-aircraft fire and fiery crashes following damage sustained in combat. Many of these brave men succumbed far from their families, with their fallen bodies sometimes lost amidst the wreckage in remote German crash sites, where recovery was difficult if not impossible. On the German side, the pilots operating the Me-262, elite of the Luftwaffe, were considered invaluable assets whose loss was profoundly felt. Each pilot shot down or captured represented a substantial investment in time and resources. Consider the countless hours of intensive training invested to prepare just one such pilot, alongside the significant financial costs involved in production and operational support, amounting to millions of Reich marks accumulated over many years. The strategic importance of maintaining a corps of experienced jet pilots made each loss all the more damaging, as Germany's shrinking pool of trained personnel was stretched ever thinner in the desperate final months of the war. The intense pressures of continual combat and the deteriorating logistical situation contributed to an increased risk of errors in judgment, accidents during takeoff and landing, and a steady decline in combat effectiveness, even among seasoned pilots who had survived numerous sorties. As the war pressed on into early 1945, the infrastructure supporting the operation of the Me-262 began to collapse under the relentless Allied bombing campaigns and advancing ground forces. The critical raw materials required for manufacturing specialized jet fuel became scarce as refineries in Germany were systematically bombed or overtaken by the advancing Allies, hampering their ability to refuel the aircraft. Meanwhile, replacement engines, already in limited supply due to manufacturing bottlenecks, became increasingly unavailable as factories producing them fell to Allied forces or were destroyed. Supply chains for spare parts, necessary for maintaining airframes, engines, and sophisticated onboard systems, disintegrated in the chaos of continued aerial and ground assault. Trained and experienced maintenance personnel found themselves either killed in air raids or reassigned in desperation to frontline infantry units, further hampering operational readiness. As front lines shifted steadily eastward, the once familiar airfields and bases in Germany became unsafe, falling into disrepair or coming under direct attack. Many Me-262 units had to adapt by operating from makeshift landing strips, sections of autobahns, or hidden woodland areas to conceal their aircraft from reconnaissance and enemy attacks. By the final weeks of the war, roughly in April and early May of 1945, the operational capabilities of the German jet fleet were desperately strained. Straggling units conducted sporadic sorties, often independently or without centralized command, with severely curtailed supplies and minimal organization. Fuel shortages forced pilots to fly missions primarily when taking advantage of fleeting opportunities, attacking suitable targets whenever possible rather than executing carefully coordinated strikes. Some pilots, faced with the hopelessness of their situation, chose to fly their jets into Allied territory to surrender rather than the advent of jet-powered aircraft marked a pivotal turning point in the evolution of aerial combat, and among the most revolutionary designs to emerge during World War II was the Messerschmitt Me-262. In the final throes of the war, a select group of pilots, including members of the renowned unit Jagdverband 44, continued to fly combat missions on these advanced aircraft well into the war's closing days. Even as the German war effort was unraveling and the regime's military machinery was collapsing under Allied pressure, these pilots persisted in engaging the enemy, registering kills amid the chaos of a crumbling front. Upon completion of the conflict, extensive analyses were undertaken by American and British aviation experts, leading to a broad consensus that the Me-262 represented a groundbreaking technological breakthrough in aeronautical engineering. This aircraft embodied features that were considered revolutionary at the time. Its jet propulsion system, sleek aerodynamics, and rapid acceleration capabilities surpassed those of contemporary propeller aircraft. Nonetheless, despite its impressive design and performance attributes, the Me-262 arrived too late in the war to influence its ultimate outcome significantly. This disparity between potential and impact stemmed from multiple interconnected factors. For instance, if Adolf Hitler, in his pursuit of maximum wartime production, had not delayed the development of bomber variants of the aircraft, if the reliability of the engines had been consistently higher, and if production levels had been increased, the jet could have exerted a considerable influence on the conflict. Yet, the grim reality was that by 1944, Germany faced a severe shortage of critical resources such as fuel, which was essential to operate the jet engines efficiently. Additionally, the nation lacked sufficient numbers of trained pilots capable of safely handling and tactically deploying the Me-262. Moreover, Germany's air superiority was a distant memory by this point, given the overwhelming numerical and logistical superiority of Allied air forces that dominated the skies. The Germans simply did not possess the necessary favorable conditions, adequate supplies, experienced personnel, and control of the airspace, to fully leverage the advanced capabilities of the Me-262. No matter how superior its technological design might have been, the jet could not overcome these strategic limitations. The fundamental issues of resource scarcity, pilot training, and operational freedom hindered its potential. Despite these limitations, the legacy of the Me-262's engagement with Allied fighters, particularly the widely fought battles against the North American Mustang, radiated far beyond the end of the war. The confrontations and the tactics developed during these encounters profoundly influenced subsequent doctrines and strategic thinking in fighter aviation. Central to this influence was the realization that possessing technologically superior equipment did not necessarily guarantee tactical or operational success. This lesson became a cornerstone of military aviation philosophy worldwide, emphasizing that technological advantages could be countered through specific tactics and strategic exploitation. In particular, the importance of identifying and exploiting enemy vulnerabilities rather than simply confronting their strengths became ingrained in fighter pilot training programs. Even the most revolutionary weapons systems, such as the Me-262, exhibited fundamental weaknesses that skillful opposition could exploit. This understanding shaped military planning and procurement decisions during the Cold War era, influencing the development of new weapons, tactics, and strategic paradigms. For instance, American pilots developed specific countermeasures to their jet adversaries, including tactics like using altitude to build increased speed before dives, timing attacks during critical vulnerable flight phases, and maintaining persistent patrols over known enemy operating areas. Pilots' personal accounts from this period offer invaluable insights into the psychological and tactical intricacies of engaging with advanced jet aircraft. Chuck Jagger, recounting his experiences in his autobiography and interviews, emphasized that successfully downing Me-262s demanded acceptance of extraordinary risks and quick decision-making under imperfect information. He described the tense moments of loitering near German airfields, conscious that enemy fighters and flak defenses would target him during attack runs. The skill involved in timing a dive, to maximize speed and effectiveness at critical moments, was immense. Yet, despite these hazardous conditions, the satisfaction of demonstrating that American fighters could counter the seemingly invincible jets remained a significant motivator for many pilots. Another notable figure, Urban Drew, only received formal recognition for his combat achievements in the year 1983, nearly 4 decades after his victories. Reflecting on this delay, Drew expressed frustration at the years lost to bureaucratic processes and the lack of contemporaneous supporting evidence that could corroborate his claims. Nevertheless, he underscored that what mattered most was the importance of the missions they undertook, focused on strategic objectives rather than personal glory. The technical lessons gleaned from the operations of the Me-262 did not fade into obscurity after the war. Instead, they directly influenced the designs and development of subsequent aircraft, most notably the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which became America's first operational jet fighter. As the war concluded, Lockheed's engineers undertook exhaustive studies of captured Me-262s, meticulously examining engine configurations, airframe designs, and onboard systems in an effort to understand their performance and limitations fully. This scientific approach provided critical insights that would inform the development, refinement. The story of the Messerschmitt Me-262 encapsulates a complex interplay of triumph and setback, highlighting both the remarkable achievements and the profound limitations inherent in this pioneering aircraft. Designed with the purpose of overcoming the deficiencies identified in earlier jet and piston-powered fighters, the Me-262 was equipped with advanced features that signaled a significant leap forward in aviation technology. Its engines, for instance, not only promised longer operational life but also offered more responsive throttle control, which directly addressed one of the jet fighter's most critical vulnerabilities that marred the early experiences of aircraft like the Messerschmitt Me-262. Furthermore, the improvements introduced in fuel efficiency extended the aircraft's operational range beyond the previously limited maximum of 650 miles, thereby enhancing its tactical versatility. This aspect was crucial for supporting longer-range missions and deepening penetration into enemy territory. Additionally, modifications to the landing gear resulted in increased durability. The sturdier undercarriage significantly reduced the accident rate that had historically plagued these aircraft in German service, especially during the stressful conditions of takeoff and landing in combat zones. Enhancing pilot awareness was another area of focus for German engineers, who improved cockpit visibility, a feature indispensable during critical phases of flight such as takeoff and landing, especially under combat stress. These improvements contributed to better situational awareness, empowering pilots to make quicker, more informed decisions during vulnerable moments. The influence of the Me-262 extended well beyond German borders, as Soviet engineers undertook similar research by studying captured aircraft and engines. These sources were shipped to Soviet laboratories, where they were subjected to intensive testing and analysis. The intelligence gained from these efforts significantly shaped the design of later Soviet jets, including the MiG-15 and Yak-15, although the Soviets also integrated British engine technology obtained through covert means such as espionage and formal technology agreements. The widespread dissemination of insights derived from the Me-262's design and operational performance accelerated the global transition from piston-powered aircraft to jet propulsion. This technological shift fundamentally altered aerial combat and strategy during the late 1940s and into the 1950s. Within a decade after the conclusion of the Second World War, propeller-driven fighters had effectively become obsolete in frontline duties across nearly every nation's air forces worldwide, replaced by newer, faster, and more capable jet aircraft. However, an objective review of Me-262 operations reveals a nuanced picture. The aircraft scored notable tactical successes, with individual pilots often accumulating impressive kill counts, and some missions underscoring the potential advantages of jet-powered warfare under advantageous conditions. Yet, these localized victories did little to shift the broader strategic balance. Despite its technological significance, the Me-262's overall contribution to altering the outcome of the war was marginal. The strategic bombing campaigns persisted unabated, and Allied fighters, supported by their vast industrial and logistical superiority, maintained air dominance. Ground forces on the western and eastern fronts continued their push into Germany with sufficient air cover, affirming that the jet's influence was limited primarily to select engagements rather than overarching strategic wins. The resource-intensive nature of the Me-262 program exemplifies a critical central issue. The development and production process required significant allocations of scarce materials, manufacturing capacity, and highly skilled labor, resources that could arguably have been more effectively used to develop and produce conventional fighters. Such aircraft, perhaps more compatible with existing fuel supplies and pilot training programs, might have proven more effective on the battlefield. The popular narrative of German pilots proudly showcasing their advanced jets until they were caught off guard by less technologically sophisticated but numerically superior Allied fighters, such as the Mustang, ultimately underscores a key truth. Technological innovation alone cannot solve strategic and resource-related challenges. Germany's achievement in developing the world's first operational jet fighter marked a significant milestone, a scientific and engineering breakthrough that promised tactical dominance. Nevertheless, this achievement was muted by the nation's fundamental shortages in manpower, fuel, and industrial capacity, as well as its less advantageous strategic position. These deficiencies rendered the formidable technological marvel ultimately ineffective against the overwhelming resources available to Allied forces. Despite their relatively less advanced aircraft, American and Allied pilots succeeded in countering the technological edge of the Me-262 through a combination of relentless persistence, continual technological adaptation, and tactical ingenuity. Supported by an all-encompassing industrial infrastructure, comprehensive pilot training programs, logistic resilience, and well-grounded tactical doctrines, they managed to neutralize what could have been a game-changing weapon. This confrontation vividly demonstrates that victory in aerial warfare depends not solely on technological superiority but also on the effective harnessing of logistics, training, and strategic coordination. In its historical context, the Me-262 remains one of aviation's most intriguing symbols of what might have been a machine that represented the future of aerial combat but arrived too late to alter the outcome of global conflict. Its record, marked by moments of brilliance in specific engagements, ultimately fell short of transforming the broader war effort. The American pilots who developed and executed countermeasures proved that innovation, persistence, and tactical mastery could overcome even the most advanced technological threats, emphasizing that airplanes are merely one component of the tactics devised to confront the formidable jet threat in aviation history earned their place not through cutting-edge technological innovations alone, but rather through a combination of exemplary tactical ingenuity, extraordinary courage, and a steadfast refusal to concede advantage in the face of an apparently unbeatable adversary. These strategies demonstrated that human skill, when properly harnessed, through diligent training, effective doctrine, decisive leadership, and unwavering resolve, could triumph over technological shortcomings and limitations. This remarkable success story validated a fundamental principle: that human factors could dismantle even the most advanced technological threats, provided they were executed with discipline and strategic vision. The shift from German overconfidence to the ascendancy of Allied dominance during the confrontations involving jet fighters and the legendary Mustang unfolded remarkably quickly, within a span of less than 1 year. Specifically, this transition began in October of the year before the war's end, when the first Me-262 was intercepted and shot down, and culminated in May when the last jet operations on both sides halted altogether. This rapid transformation was not the result of a single, isolated element, but rather the outcome of a cumulative process: systematic exploitation of the vulnerabilities inherent in the Me-262, paired with relentless Allied pressure that prevented the Germans from establishing sustainable jet-based operations. Every Me-262 destroyed during moments such as takeoff or landing represented one less aircraft available for crucial bomber interception missions, a significant blow to the German war effort. Moreover, each pilot lost, whether killed or captured, meant the loss of invaluable experience and expertise that had taken considerable time and effort to develop. This erosion of skilled personnel reduced the Luftwaffe's effectiveness and morale. Meanwhile, successful Allied strikes targeting jet bases forced the Germans to disperse their fighting units, making coordinated attacks more difficult. As a result, the German pilots, especially in the final months, found themselves fighting with mounting desperation as their tactical positions steadily worsened with each passing day. Limited by shortages of fuel, they could only conduct the most essential sorties, while engine malfunctions often kept aircraft grounded for extended periods, further hampering operational capacity. Allied fighter patrols made every takeoff and landing sharply perilous, creating an environment where no movement was without risk. The constant disruption caused by base relocations hampered German operations and undermined morale, yet despite overwhelming challenges, some pilots continued to fly combat missions right until the war's final hours. Their persistence and professionalism, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, revealed a remarkable spirit, an embodiment of duty, honor, and a hope that their sacrifices might somehow influence the war's outcome. Ultimately, the story of these jets did not conclude in a final, decisive battle. Rather, it faded gradually, as the German military infrastructure disintegrated altogether in early May of the year following. The Me-262s, which once symbolized German technological ambition, were left abandoned on airfields, pushed into forests to prevent their capture, or destroyed by their own crews to deny the aircraft to the advancing Allied forces. A few were flown into Allied-controlled territory and surrendered voluntarily, but the majority simply ceased flying as dwindling fuel reserves and maintenance shortages made operations impossible. The jets, a technological promise of sweeping victory, had seen their operational lives cut short, scattered across the landscape of Germany as silent witness to a profound gap between potential and reality. At the same time, the Mustang pilots, who had faced and hunted these jets, returned home, victorious, at war's end. Their mission was accomplished. The jet menace had been effectively neutralized through a series of tactical doctrines and strategies that proved superior to mere technological means. This narrative serves as a testament to the enduring power of tactical ingenuity, human bravery, and strategic perseverance in shaping military history, where innovation in tactics can often make the difference where technology alone falls short.